Alright, welcome back, Victorum Gaming fans and Hail Caesar fans. Moving right along in our series where we're covering the different factions for Hail Caesar, and we're working our way through the BC period still here. So today we got an interesting one. So we've covered Old, Middle, and New Kingdom Egyptian. Now we have what's called the Saite Egyptian. Not sure what the pronunciation is on it, but so basically this is Egypt after the Assyrian Empire collapsed. So roughly 7th through 4th centuries BC here. So a lot of interesting little things that are going on with this list, and basically you can start to see some of the other Mediterranean influences here as we work through what all comprises the army. So and it's a list that also has basically a lot of again, considering Assyria just fell and Egypt got its independence back, so there's a lot of also like mercenary influence here that we haven't really seen too much of before. So for those thinking or looking for like a specific dynasty, as it says here, basically 26th dynasty is a good point to look up. So what do we have here on the army breakdown? So chariots up to 10%. And 1+. So what does that mean? Up to 1 in 10 units in the army may be chariots, and the army must include at least 1 unit of chariots regardless of the size. So you are required to just have at least a chariot unit regardless of what you do, but only a max of 10. Cavalry also can be up to 25%. They're not grouped with the chariots like we've seen in a couple lists, so that's a separate entry there. Infantry does have to be at least half your army, though, and again, not counting skirmishers. And then here we get a little interesting twist. Greek mercenaries may not outnumber Egyptian spearmen. So among your infantry, again, you have, as we said, mercenary access here, but the Greeks just can't outnumber the Egyptian spearmen, period. So whatever flavors of Greek mercenaries you got here, as long as they're not outnumbering the Egyptians. And then our usual division and skirmisher breakdown. So let's jump right in and see what these guys have, because it's definitely different from a lot of the recent lists we've looked at. So start off with our Egyptian medium infantry spearmen, and as we've seen with basically all medium infantry that seem to lead off these lists, basically about the same as all the rest here. So respectable clash and sustain for medium infantry. 6 is there, a little bit of short range. Nothing on long, okay morale save as we typically see with the mediums, and for 23 points a unit, which is also fairly standard. Now we can pay a little bit more to upgrade them to long spears, which you see the reduction in range there, but 3 extra points for the unit. But the long spears do give you that slight advantage. Again, we'll cover special rules and all that, weapons and all that in a separate series of videos. Beyond that, there's a couple more sort of upgrades or downgrades depending on how you want to look at it. So you can reduce to make the Egyptian spearmen or long spears levy. So that's for either of those two above options. So basically just getting that discount, and you do have the levy rule to deal with. So which is kind of interesting because you can pay the extra to upgrade them to the long spears, but then downgrade your upgrade basically to make them levy long spearmen. So it's basically you get the long spears for free, but you are a levy at that point. So kind of an interesting way to look at that. And then extra to make Egyptian spearmen or long spears guard unit. You only get 1 unit to do that with. So basically that's kind of like your elite infantry unit there. But you do get, as we say here, elite and tough fighters for 4 extra points. So well worth it as a sort of elite unit that can sort of stand up a little bit better throughout the course of the battle. Medium infantry bowmen, so usually we see light bowmen and skirmisher bowmen here, but here we have medium infantry bowmen. So considering they're not really built to get into combat, but they do have that clash and sustain of 5, rock solid ranged ability, and an actual morale save. And normally we don't see that with bow, like specifically dedicated bow troops, so that's actually pretty cool. You do pay for that though at 24 points a unit. We can make the bowman levies, and that gives you a little bit of a point reduction down to 21 points a unit. And again, if you can manage the levy rule basically and keep these guys out of trouble, that could be an interesting way to go. And then you can pay for 1 unit basically to get a sort of guard bowman unit, so kind of that elite bowman unit. Again, we haven't really seen much of that. It's usually like an infantry or cavalry unit that gets that kind of an upgrade. So sort of an elite bow unit, and as we see here, they get elite and marksman. So stats don't change for any of these 3 options, but elite and marksman is actually pretty cool. You will pay 28 points for that unit though, but could be worth it. Now we get on to some of these mercenary and other sort of funky options that we have here. So Greek mercenary hoplite heavy infantry with long spears. So sevens. So again, that's where we're going to start seeing a lot of these better overall heavy infantry units start coming in once we get into the Greeks, and then the Romans eventually, and so on and so forth. So and as we can see, just rock solid stats there. Sevens for combat, so definitely a tick above all the sort of medium and light infantry that we've been dealing with for the most part here. 4 up on the morale save, and 29 points a unit, so nothing special there. We can pay extra, basically 3 extra points to make them phalanx, and then we can actually have elite phalanxes on top of that for another 3 points there, basically. So or phalanx elite, we'll get it right. Again, we can't outnumber our Egyptian spearmen, but if you want to sort of bulk up or buff up your infantry selection here with just rock solid troops, unless you're going for like a specifically Egyptian themed force, definitely worth considering bringing in some Greek mercenary troops here, just to add that extra punch and steadiness to your infantry lines here. So again, phalanx and elite are no joke, and you're not restricted as far as anything else. I mean, you got to pay the points, but you could have all of your Greek mercenaries be elite phalanx troops, basically, again, as long as they're not outnumbering the Egyptians. So that could come as a little bit of a surprise to opponents who might not be expecting that type of quality in an Egyptian list as far as the infantry goes. Then we get into some light infantry. You got access to Nubian light infantry with bows. Again, the typically weak combat stats there, and does sort of make that difference between the medium infantry bowmen a little bit more pronounced with the 5s that they had and the 4s here. But these guys are here to shoot their bows, not fight in combat, ideally. So, but you get your 3s. This is again a normal size bow unit, not a small unit, 20 points. More of the skirmisher units now. Egyptian, Libyan, or Greek skirmishers with javelins as small units. So again, negligible combat stats, but you do get that short range ability there for just the 11 points. And similarly, Egyptian or Nubian, not Greek here, slingers or bows as small units. Again, combat drops off a little bit with just the 2s there, but you do get that long range ability coming back in for 12 points. And then here, as from our previous list, where we talked about Scythians, Scythian horse archers fielded as small units. So we talked about those before, and that does give you access to Parthian shot and, again, a little bit of mobility in your list. So again, chariots, as we'll get through here, up to 10% of your whole list, you do have to have at least 1 unit, and then cavalry up to a quarter. But so far, this is really basically like an infantry-dominated list. But you do get a little bit of cavalry access here. And then here now, Egyptian or Arab light cavalry with spears and or javelins. Very respectable clash value of 7 there. Drops down to 5, of course, so these guys are not going to be long for the fight. Basically, again, they're just light cavalry, but they can definitely get some work done. 6-up saves for both those cavalry units, actually. And then they have the feigned flight rule. So a nice little hit and run unit that actually has some punch, especially considering that they're light cavalry. So definitely worth considering making, you get your up to 25% cavalry allotment. So definitely worth maybe taking a look at that. And then moving on, we go to the second page here, because this is actually a fairly long list with many units. Egyptian or Arab light cavalry with spears and or javelins. So drops down a little bit there on the combat ability, but the short range drops off as well. But again, this is a small unit, so, and a little bit cheaper there. Again, practically nothing for morale save. Interesting here, you can bring in some camel units too. Again, javelins or bows as small units. Again, okay clash value. Again, if you're fighting similar types of units, other small units, units that don't have morale or whatever. And they do have the feigned flight rule too, which is pretty cool for a camel unit, and they do give you that long range option too. So something to consider there. 21 points on that unit. And then we bring in our chariots here. So kind of a little surprise here at the end of the list. You'd only get up to 10% of your list as chariots, and you do have to have at least one unit, but at the end here they kind of sneak in some more heavy-hitting units for the Egyptians. So we have two different 4-horse chariot units, a light version and a heavy version. So the light version is still packing some respectable combat dice here, 7 and 6, with, again, rock-solid range ability, as good as any of the infantry ranged units. 4-up morale save too, very good, and at 31 points a unit. And then, interestingly, for just one more point per unit here, it's the 4-horse heavy chariot with, again, bow and javelin. So, and again, this almost seems like a no-brainer. For 1 extra point, you're getting an extra clash, but they don't have as good of a sustained, so something to keep in mind. Bow option, basically short and long stay the same. You do get a morale save of 3 up as a bonus there. Stamina stays the same. So, you know, you might think, yeah, the light chariot unit has better sustain, so they're going to be better in the long run, but they also have a weaker morale save, so chances are you're going to take more casualties. So is rolling 1 less dice after the first combat worse, but you know you do have that better armor save. So which one's really more durable? Something to maybe test out a little bit. But for 1 extra point, I think I would probably if I was just running the 1 chariot unit, I would probably make sure I could spend the 32 points and just have that at least be the heavy chariot unit, just for that extra shock value of 8 when we're throwing the clash dice here, and just a 3-up morale save is pretty nasty too. So commanders here, so still solid with that 8 that we've seen with practically every army that we've covered. So even though this is like Egypt right after the collapse of the Assyrian Empire, kind of reasserting their independence, still that okay leadership, so you're not hampered by leadership 7 with such a diverse army or anything like that. So really cool list, and again, if you've already collected Egyptians like a New Kingdom list, this allows you to basically bring in some different things, so a little bit more on the like Arab cavalry, camels, some Scythians even, Nubians, and first time here really Greek mercenaries, so bringing in some hoplites. So a pretty diverse list for Egypt, really, that can actually do a whole hell of a lot of different things. You got very solid infantry, solid, actually medium bowmen. Not used to saying something like that. It's usually light infantry bowmen, skirmisher bowmen, small unit bowmen. No. Here we actually have medium infantry bowmen. So in a pinch, they can actually duke it out a little bit in combat. So pretty cool there. And again, just nice little things in this list, like you have a guard medium spearman unit there. You have a guard bowman unit. You can have a whole ton of elite phalanx units for the mercenaries, or if you want to keep them cheap, just heavy hoplites with long spears. All kinds of flavors of skirmishers here, not as diverse as a lot of the other lists, but you got Scythians, you got Egyptian or Arab light cavalry, camels, and then some actually really cool chariots too to round things out, all with that respectable leadership of 8. So not New Kingdom, but so the Saite, however you want to pronounce it, Egyptian list, something cool to collect. Again, if you're already into Egyptians or even into Greeks a little bit, or even the some of the Arab lists or Scythians, dipping in a little bit here to build up an Egyptian list, or again, if you're Egyptian, being able to sprinkle in some of these units from other factions and sort of have this really cool diverse list is actually something really neat as we again move closer to more typical Greek and Roman times that sort of get more of the limelight. So definitely a cool list that you can actually have that would be contemporary with some of these earlier Greek and Roman type lists. So before we get into like the Ptolemies and stuff like that. So something to sort of look at, maybe not again sort of the most common thing to collect, but it's a little bit something different that your opponents might have to learn to respect with everything these guys have available to them. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video here. Give us a like if you could, and a subscribe if you haven't already, and then stay tuned for more Hail Caesar content.